Hey guys, you know it's been a while since I talked about my compost tumbler. The reason being is when I made my previous videos, I failed to mention that I wasn't going to use this tumbler until I was done with my other piles. I have these cement bricks or cement blocks that I have laid out, and I've got a couple piles in there that I've been trying to finish up and throwing a little bit more kitchen scraps and stuff in there. So I didn't want to use this until I was ready to actually just go full bore on it. But I had a lot of people were always sending me messages saying, when are you going to use that? When are you going to make a video on using that? What are you going to do? So I finally just got kind of like, I got inundated, and so I just decided, you know, I'm just going to let those other piles go, and I'm just going to start using this. Now, the hardest thing I think that people go through is trying to find the right ratio. I had a friend that had a tumbler. It wasn't this model, but it was a different brand. And he said that the stuff just rotted, and he just kept throwing kitchen scraps in there and just kept loading it. He said and it just rotted. Well, I think that's the biggest problem that people have, is not finding the right ratio. I don't think a perfect ratio is that important, but I think there are a couple do's and don'ts. But I think that if you don't put too much of the greens in, which would be your nitrogen source, I think you're going to be okay. If you have a lot more of your carbon, your browns, I think you're going to do just fine. I've heard a lot of people say that the ratios are usually 1-to-1 or 2-to-1. You know, I try to go a lot heavier than that on my carbons, because I just don't want this to get really wet. When your pile gets too wet, what happens is there's too much moisture in there. There's not enough oxygen. So it's not aerated enough. So a lot of microbial activity kind of stops, and it just rots and it smells and it just gets nasty. So what I've got here is, if you saw my previous videos on my seed saving and my storage, you know those boxes that I made those out of pine boards, and they're just 100% pine. There's no cedar or anything else in there. And when I drilled those, I came up with these shavings here from my drill press, and so it's 100% pine shavings. I've got like 3 of these bags, and I saved them when I was making those boxes. So this is one of my sources of brown here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dump these in. Now, one of the biggest challenges, of course, is having too much kitchen scraps, and I think that everybody has that challenge. But what I do is, when I'm working in the kitchen and I'm just wiping the counters or something, I always make sure that I save my paper towels too. I know a lot of people will just break them up and they'll rip them into little dinky shreds or run them through a paper shredder. I don't. You know, and I don't even worry about like lettuces and things like that. Dump them in. I got lettuce, and yes, I do throw orange peels. I throw orange peels in there. Believe it or not, people say don't put citrus. I've never had a problem with citrus breaking down. Now, I have had a problem with, you know, they're kind of a little bit bigger, and so it'll take them a little bit longer just because of their size. But I throw them in. To me, they're a great source of greens. And then I got eggshells in here, and you know, you don't want to look at all my compost, do you know? So I'm going to throw that in. Now, get in there. Now in there I've got coffee grounds, and I've got unbleached coffee filters and things like that, and I throw my eggshells and all of my fruits and all my vegetables in there. And then I'm going to go ahead and dump all these in. Now, as long as you have more of the brown, and I can throw that in too. I'll shred that up and throw it in. As long as you have more of the brown than you do the green, it's not going to get too wet. Now, of course, you don't want it to be too dry, because you want to keep it moist, but you want it kind of like a wrung out sponge. You don't want it to be super wet. One of the great things about this, there are some cracks in the bottom, so a lot of the water will run out if it's too wet. But what you can also do is, if you have too many table scraps and it's just too wet, too much of your greens, don't be afraid to go ahead and buy yourself a bag of compost, and then just take and throw a little bit of your compost from a bag in there to kind of keep it going. And then once you get this completely done, you've got a nice big, I don't know how many cubic, of compost. Save a bunch of this in a couple 5-gallon buckets and use all the rest of it, but save a little bit to kind of add to your next pile that you start, because you're going to need a lot more carbon, and that's the key. A lot of people are using way too much of the greens, too much of the nitrogen-based scraps for their tumblers and whatnot. So I'm going to start filling this up, and as the days go on, I'm going to kind of show you what it looks like. So I've got tons of table scraps to put in here, so, and I do have more of the shavings, so I'm going to probably fill this thing up about halfway. And then as it rolls on, I'll show you how quick some of that stuff breaks down. All right, so I'm going to call this part one of 3,000. And I'll let you know how this goes, but I think as it sits right now, I think this is going to work. It's going to work a lot better than my outdoor piles. It's going to be a lot cleaner, a lot more, well, I'm not going to get the animals in here. That's been a big problem for me, is the bears, and that's basically bears. I know I have some of the other animals, raccoons and things like that, but they don't devastate my pile like the bears do. The bears like come in and just kind of drag it halfway across the back lot there. So anyways, all right, so there's video one, guys, and keep watching, and don't forget to go to our website and sign up for our email system, and anytime a new post comes up or a new video is posted, you'll get a notification on that. All right, thanks a lot for watching, guys. We'll catch you later.